To start off, we're gonna review like we usually do. I know that we review this stuff every week. I'm sure it probably gets a little bit old, but remember what we said. Paul is very progressive and logical in his writing, and so he's building every argument upon the previous one. If you miss something, if you don't know what Paul said before, you're not going to fully comprehend what he's saying in the current moment. So we said Paul is trying to bring about what in the Roman Church? Unity. Why? Aha.
Because they're not
United. There you go, Kobe.
Some are trying to go by the law, and some are trying to obey the law, I guess.
Yeah, basically, yeah. You've got the Gentile Christians, you've got the Jewish Christians, and the Jewish Christians are trying to argue you still need to obey the law, you still need to obey the kosher eating laws, you still got to be circumcised, you still got to do all this other different stuff. And the Gentile Christians are trying to argue, no, you don't have to do any of that. In fact, you can just totally disregard the law at this point. You don't need to look at that anymore whatsoever. And Paul's saying, you're both wrong. So, how should everyone have been able to see God, and why does it matter? How should the Gentiles have been able to see God? Yeah, nature, right. Whether it's just, like physical nature around us or our own instincts and such, the fact that we can sit there and if I smacked Strand, you all would be like, that's just mean. That's what we're talking about, because that's not right to just all of a sudden go off and clock someone, and we know that that's not something that we do, okay? If I all of a sudden just stole Kobe's boots and then ran off, you all would be really upset with me. Some of you might be laughing, but most of you guys would be like, no, that's not right, okay? So, and how should the Jews have known about God and what he wanted? Yeah, the Torah, the law. So they had the law, they had the full opportunity to know exactly what God wanted them to do and how he wanted them to act, and yet all they did with the law was point fingers and say, you're gone, and you're not doing things right. And so the reason that it matters, is because everybody is under judgment of sin. Everybody is responsible for the idea of being judged. And Paul is specifically saying, look, you can't sit there and argue, well, I didn't know, or, well, we had the law. You didn't know, but you should have. You had the law, but you didn't use it right. So everybody's subject to sin, and everybody needs Jesus. And that's one of the things that he's getting at in the book of Romans. So what was the purpose of the law? What did the law do?
To point out sin.
Point out sin and cover it. Exactly. Yeah, and so it showed us what sin was because it showed us God's holy nature. And so because we knew God's holy nature, anything less than that is sin. And so now we know, okay, these are the things that I shouldn't do, right? And so, and then it gives us the opportunity through sacrifice to cover over sin, but it didn't actually get rid of it, okay? So how are we connected to Abraham's family? Aha. Jesus. No, how are we connected to Abraham's family? What? There we go. Yeah. Faith. Okay. Because did Abraham have the law when he was around? No. Abraham did not have the law. Law didn't come until Moses, and that was like 400, 500 years after Abraham. Okay? So no, Abraham did not have the law. Was Abraham circumcised when God considered him righteous? No. All right? God comes and shows up to Abraham, and he tells him, move far away, do all this stuff, and I'll bless you and your family and everything else. Abraham believes him, and God credited to him as righteousness. Okay? So it's faith that connects us, and this is something that Paul keeps getting back to when he talks about being in the family of God, he specifically mentions that the true Israel is the one that follows God's commands, that has faith in him. And so you've got all these different people, and this is when he gets into like Esau and Jacob. Esau and Jacob. Which one should have gotten the blessing based on birth order? Esau. He was the first. Did Esau do what was right? No. So who got the birthright? Jacob. So Jacob, even though he didn't really initially act very in accordance with what God would have had him done, God chooses to bless that particular line. So we're connected to the family not by blood, not by circumcision, but by faith. Now the law couldn't change it, but the Spirit can through Christ. Law couldn't change it, but the Spirit can through Christ. There you go. Yeah. Huh? Yeah. All right. So, I mean, and the point that Paul gets at, this is when he gets into the whole idea of the things that I want to do, I do. I don't do those things. The things that I don't want to do, these are the things that I do. And so he gets into that. Yes, I just said that. How many of you guys have ever told yourself, no, I do not want to do that particular thing, and then you ended up doing it anyways? Say what? Okay. And this is the thing, is that's our human nature that keeps us doing the things that we know we shouldn't be doing. Okay? And through Christ, we can actually be changed of that. That's the whole idea, is that the Spirit in us gives us the ability to transform away from those things. So do we still follow the law? Yes. Do we still follow the law? Basically. Yeah. I mean, when Jesus gets here, he says, I did not come to abolish the law, but to what? Fulfill it. Yeah, fulfill it. And so the whole thing is that we don't have to do certain things anymore. And this is the point that Paul is trying to make. We don't have to worry about the kosher eating laws. We don't have to worry about always, offering a sacrifice every time we do something wrong. That we don't need that. We don't have to do the special festivals and all these kind of things, because in Christ it's made new. It's fulfilled. And so we do still follow the intent of the law. We still follow the heart of the law. So when the Ten Commandments sit there and say, honor your father and mother, don't boast, don't envy your neighbor's possessions, etc., we still follow that. Okay? The argument that the Gentile Christians were having of, well, we don't need any of this stuff anymore, is not going to fly. And anytime you hear somebody say, well, that's the Old Testament, we don't need to worry about that, that doesn't fly. That goes totally against what Paul would say here in Romans. Okay? So we have a choice to rebel or obey. Esau didn't get the blessing. Did he still have to go off and be an idiot? No. If he had been told from the get-go, you're not going to get the blessing, God's going to follow this path over here for blessing Jacob's family and doing all this, he'll still take care of you, though. I mean, he still could have chosen to follow God's commands. And this is something that we pointed out about the book of Ecclesiastes, is that Ecclesiastes specifically says the only good thing in life that makes any sense whatsoever is to obey God's commands. Because even if you still don't end up with a very good life because of all the trouble that this world has, this is the only thing that is worth anything, period. And so even if all you do throughout your life is obey God's commands, you've had a good life. So we said the correct response to God's law is confession and adoration, like the tax collector, to not sit there and get so caught up in the fact that we are saved that we start to boast about it, and become like the Pharisee in Jesus' example. And we have been brought into God's covenant family by grace. So last week we talked about the engrafted branches. And did that make sense for everybody? Everybody good? Yeah. All righty. Well, then on that note, we're going to go ahead and dive right into chapter 12. I didn't animate those. Awesome. All right, well, chapter 12. I'm guessing you guys started over there last week? Sure. Okay. So we'll start over here, chapter 12. We'll do 2 verses each. Romans 12. All right. Strand, as soon as you're ready, go ahead and go for it.
I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect.
For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function.
So in Christ, we through many form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophecy, then prophecy, and prophet in accordance with your faith.
If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. And if it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully.
Let love be without hypocrisy. Avoid what is evil, and do what is good. Be kindly affectionate to one another, but brotherly love and honor, giving preference to one another. Not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoice in hope, patient in
Tribulations.
continuing steadfastly in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need, practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse.
Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn, live in harmony with one another, do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be deceived. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right and yet in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone.
Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's law, for it is written, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay," says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, if he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Okay. Were there any passages there that you guys found that you were particularly struck by or had questions about? All right. Okay, so first thing to remember is that Paul starts off chapter 12 with therefore. What did we say about therefore?
It's there for a reason.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. If you see therefore, you need to look back to see what was being said. Okay? And so if you see that, you got to remember to go back and look back through what was already said, because if you miss it, if you didn't understand what he was saying before, you're going to completely miss what he's saying ahead. Okay? Oh, nuts. I completely forgot this. Okay, so If I was to walk up to you guys and hand you just this really nasty looking candy bar, like I'd already taken a bite out of it, it was covered in lint, like I literally just like pulled it out of my pocket, and I was like, Caitlin, you want a candy bar? What would you think of that? Notice I said I was giving it to a girl. Okay. I mean that's kind of gross, right? So, as a living sacrifice, we should offer our best to God. All right. When Cain and Abel are still alive, and they're both offering sacrifices, what kind of sacrifice does Abel offer? Does he just sit there and like find some sick sheep and go, you're not going to be around much longer anyways?
No.
No. What kind of sheep does he offer? Lamb, whatever.
Healthy ones.
Yeah, the best one, right? He's finding the best sheep or lamb, whatever, that he can offer, and he's giving that to God. All right. Cain gets ready to offer a sacrifice, and he's providing fruit from the land or produce or whatever it is that he's harvesting. Does he offer God the best? No. He's basically just kind of saying, well, I really want to eat this one. This one here looks pretty tasty. I'm just going to burn this here apple, so I'm just going to go ahead and toss it in the fire and call it good. And that's the reason why his sacrifices weren't being accepted, because he wasn't giving God the best, the first. Okay? And so when we are approaching God, we need to be giving our best. A lot of times you'll see people take verses 1 and 2 here, and you'll see them like take one verse and not together. They'll sit there and like share those on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. But they're really meant to be taken together. Okay? That we should always be offering God our best, and that when we don't show up with our full heart into whatever it is that we're doing. And I'm not just talking about sports. I'm not just talking about testing or anything else. I mean, when you even show up here, are you coming to class with your full heart devoted to God? Are you going into the worship service with your full heart ready to give God praise? Because when we don't do that, we're not giving God our best. We're not really being a good living sacrifice. But the other thing to take into consideration here is that we're living sacrifices. Okay? And so when you look at verses 1 through 2, he talks in verse 1 about being a living sacrifice, and then in verse 2 he starts talking about don't conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so this is why these two verses have to be taken together, is because of the fact that you're looking at how we continue to be made better if we allow God's Spirit to transform us. Okay? Not texting. All right? So, if we continue to allow God's Spirit to transform us, then we're going to be continuously making ourselves better, because we're going to be continuing to be making ourselves more like Christ. Being transformed isn't just a one-time event. You're not going to just sit there and get baptized and all of a sudden, ta-da, yay, I'm done. It's a process. And if you look in the original language, you're going to see that every single time that they talk about this stuff, that it's a starting point, and that you're going to continuously be made new each and every day, that you allow God's Spirit to take effect and actually influence your life and your heart. Okay? So in verse 3 he says, he basically says, don't think too much of yourselves. See yourselves as people rescued by God. I don't know what on earth my notes are trying to say here, but the whole division in Rome is occurring because both groups are attacking each other, and then when you attack somebody else, what do you start to do about yourself? If you start trying to attack somebody else's position on something, you sit there and talk about how you're wrong too?
No.
No, what do you start saying about yourself?
Brag on yourself.
Yeah. And that's exactly what's happening in the church in Rome. They're sitting there attacking the other person and then sitting there saying, but we're so much better. And so Paul's having to address this and say, don't get caught up in yourselves. Remember who you are. See yourselves as people who have been rescued by Christ. Okay? And this is going to go for any conflict that you guys are going to see in the church going forward. You are likely going to experience something as you grow up, especially growing up in the church, where two people start to have a disagreement. You may be one of those people that have a disagreement with the other person. And you're going to have to remember, don't think too much of yourself. Remember to be devoted to one another in love. And that's what he's trying to explain. All right? We're going to take a moment. And how many people do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 6, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. All right. We're going to take a moment here. We're going to play Mafia real quick. All right? Make sure that everything's spread out pretty good. That was a terrible shuffle. Try it now. Okay. So, Mafia goes as follows. If you get the ace, you're the Mafia. If you've got the king, you're the sheriff. If you get the queen, you're the doctor. Doctor gets one chance to guess who the Mafia killed. If you get it right, they're spared. Okay. Sheriff gets one chance to guess who the Mafia is. If you guess correctly, I'll let you know. And there you go. Ace is Mafia, King is Sheriff, Queen is Doctor. All right? Ready? All right, everybody close your eyes. All right. Mafia, wake up. Mafia, who do you want to take down? Point to somebody. Okay? Mafia, go to sleep. Sheriff, wake up. Sheriff, who do you want to save? Or who do you think the Mafia is? All right. Sheriff, you can go ahead and go to sleep. Doctor, wake up. Doctor, who do you want to save? Doctor, go to sleep. All right. Well, was it a productive night? Oh, yeah, everybody can wake up. All right, so a productive night. The Mafia killed Allie. Sorry, Allie. They were in a lively round of boomball, and when Allie caught the kickball, it exploded on her. So, all right. So who do you guys think the Mafia was? Everybody going to vote Caitlin?
Sure.
Playing backfired a little bit. Caitlin was the Mafia. All right. Raise your hand if you were the sheriff. All right. Now the sheriff, sheriff and the doctor, I specifically wrote on their cards saying don't do anything. All right. And so, had we gone a few more rounds, would the doctor have been able to save anybody? Would you guys have been able to get any help from the sheriff whatsoever? Why?
That's what the law says.
You said not to.
Yeah. Okay. But were they using their skill? No. Okay. And this is kind of what Paul starts to get at in verses 3 through 8, is that the church is going to look different, but it needs to be unified. Because each of you have a different skill. And whether that's like a regular skill, like, hey, I'm really good at fixing stuff, or hey, I'm really good at making stuff, or whatever it is. Or maybe it's your skill is that you're really good at connecting with a different type of person. Everybody has a skill. God has gifted each and every one of you with very specific things. But if you don't use your skills in God's kingdom, how far do you think it's going to get? Yeah. It'd be exactly like what we were just seeing with our Mafia game here, where nobody was able to get saved. Nobody was able to get pointed out as to who the Mafia was. And so we have to use our skills. And sometimes people are going to come in here with different personalities and different skill sets than we're used to. And if we're doing our job as a church, then we should be seeing people in here with different personalities. We should be seeing people come in here with different skills. And so the church is going to look different. The church should look different. But it should also be unified. The fact that we are in Christ should surpass anything about us. The fact that we're in Christ should surpass the fact that, well, he likes to raise his arms in worship, and I don't care for that. Okay, you love Christ. What does it matter? They want the carpet to be orange, and I prefer this other stuff. You should love Christ more than you love carpet. Okay? These are the kind of things that we're talking about. As a youth group, especially, just people in general, we're going to have different personalities. People are going to come in here that want to do or are going to actually be interested in stuff that you may not have any interest in whatsoever. How are you going to handle that? What are you guys going to do? You start having people show up that don't have the same interests that you do. What are you going to do?
Kind of give it the old college try.
Find the old college try. Raise your hand if you play sports in here. Okay. Raise your hand if you're an FFA. Raise your hand if you work with animals. Okay. Raise your hand if you're in band.
Wow.
Raise your hand if you're in theater. Raise your hand if you're in choir. Raise your hand if you're in art. You see what I'm saying? We've got a lot of sameness in here. And to a certain extent, that's good. But how are we going to reach the people that we don't connect with? How many of you guys actually go out there and actively connect with kids from the other groups? We're a little bit short on time, so I really want to leave you guys with that question for this week. Is what are you going to do to actively pursue other people? Because the church should look different. How many of you guys like to actually be outgoing and talking with a lot of different people? How many of you guys are totally fine with being just by yourself or just one other person? Like, let's put it this way. You feel more energized when, raise your hand if you feel more energized when you're around a lot of people and you're talking with a lot of people. Okay? Raise your hand if you feel more energized when you are just all on your own. When you are dead tired, do you want to be around a lot of people or do you want to be on your own? All right? Because this is the thing that, again, this is part of the thing that we have to realize is that a lot of times in the church, we sit there and get so comfortable with our personality type or our people who are interested in the same things as we are, or God forbid, people that we don't want people in the church that have different political views than we do, that the church just starts looking exactly the same. Because we're more concerned about ourselves than we are sharing God's love. The church should look different, but it needs to act unified. Okay? In verses 9 through 10, he talks about the church again, and he says, love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves. The church is a family, and as such, we need to love one another. Okay? Some of you guys might not have the best, family, relationships or whatever, but this church is supposed to act as the right family. And so we need to be making sure that we love one another, that we care for one another above ourselves. All right? So the church should always be humble, encouraging each other, and seeking out ways to use our gifts for the kingdom. All right, so we've got Senior Sunday this morning, so we won't have anything going on after morning worship or after PM worship tonight. So just spend time with your families. What was the other? Oh yeah, remember camp. If you're going to camp, I need you to get registered. Okay. And then what was the other thing? Oh yeah, if you haven't paid for the retreat stuff yet, make sure you pay for the retreat. And then we've got the t-shirts too. Okay. So that's it. Love you guys. You're awesome.
What do you want us to do with our cards?
Cards?
The monthly cards?
Oh, you can just bring them up here. Thanks.